So when you say fireworks extravaganza, we should...
Okay. Join us for today's fireworks extravaganza. We're doing that for every podcast here on out.
Oh, yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of CAL FIRE Office of the State Fire Marshal's Inside the State Fire Marshal's Office podcast, the longest name of a podcast out there that I know about. My name is Kara Garrett, and I am the co-host of this podcast, and with me is...
My name is Tim Spears, and welcome. In this episode, we're going to talk the 4th of July and fireworks safety.
Yeah, we have a two-parter. First, we will be talking to Division Chief Brice Bennett with the Fire Engineering Investigations Division to talk all things 4th of July safety.
Yes, we're going to talk illegal fireworks and fireworks disposal and how to properly use safe and sane fireworks.
Yeah, and this is a fireworks extravaganza, so please enjoy this episode, and we will see you during the conversation.
Brice, welcome to Inside the State Fire Marshal's Office.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. This is an awesome spotlight on the division. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, very excited to talk fireworks and fireworks safety and fireworks enforcement. We are coming to that time of year where we are going to start seeing more, public displays, but also our safe and sane fireworks.
Yeah, so can you briefly introduce your role and how it relates to statewide fireworks?
Sure, absolutely. So the Fire Engineering Investigations Division has 9 different programs, and 8 of those are under my purview. We license people to perform these types of activities with fireworks in general. Mostly the shooters that perform the outdoor aerial public displays you'll see. We hope that you will go and visit, that are put on typically by cities, counties, or other nonprofit organizations that are looking to bring people together. And it offers an opportunity to see the show in a beautiful and safe way. But part of our purview within the division is licensing those people so that we can have these activities in California.
Yeah, and what types of licenses does the Fire Engineering Investigation Division give to fireworks in general? You mentioned the pyrotechnic operator license. Is there any other license that the office gives?
Yeah, there are many. So within the fireworks program, we have these different activities from bringing in the fireworks into the state of California to making sure that we're selling those to people that are authorized to use them. So that's where the business licenses kind of trickle down into the operator licenses. And if you take a really wide look at the use of pyrotechnics or energetic material in California, you want to think about how it's being used for. Is it being used for a motion picture, or is it being used for public entertainment? That type of thing. And that dictates some of the licenses as far as proximity to audiences and whatnot, or to people. Is it being used in a motion picture? So the level of the licenses is depicted upon many, many different things. And just a couple of those are, proximity to audience members, and whether that audience is there as a part of a production, or if they're there as the general public. But also, if you're going to be modifying those for like motion picture and whatnot.
Okay.
From a statewide perspective, what challenges are you seeing and understanding for fireworks safety and compliance with all of these licenses that we do offer?
Yeah, well, that's kind of twofold. So one of the things with the public we really need to make sure they understand is California is just really not made for aerial fireworks that you buy in another state and you transport across state lines and bring back here. There's a reason why those are not legal in California. And they're the ones that are used by the professionals in an aerial show are much more of a controlled device, and they have a bigger kick for sure, but they are safer in the essence that they're being operated by a trained professional in a controlled setting who has a contingency plan. Now, going to another state and bringing back aerial fireworks to launch in your neighborhood cul-de-sac over your other neighbor's wood shingle shake roof that has gutters that are full of pine needles is not safe, nor will it ever be. And you don't have a contingency plan. You don't have all these other things in place. It's not legal in California, and it's just not safe. So bringing outside materials that are designed to be used in a different landscape because of the way California is, with our Mediterranean climate. We have a lot more vegetation. There is a lot more opportunity for ignitions to occur in our state in the summertime. And people will hear us say that till we're blue in the face. Like, one less spark means one less wildfire. Well, then why are we shooting things up in the air that explode?
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I think you identified maybe one of the things that, your division addresses and how we regulate those items that come into the state to ensure that they're meeting the requirements and our requirements and regulations. So how do we verify, and how do we, what steps do we go through to regulate that importation of, fireworks and explosives?
Sure. Right. So importers that bring fireworks in the state of California are required to report them to us, and they have to be licensed by us to bring those in and to be sold through wholesalers and whatnot onto the display companies. The other avenue that exists that I want to make sure there's a clear division of is, safe and sane products. We go through and we talk about, what is aren't all fireworks safe and sane? No, not by a long shot. So safe and sane fireworks, which the public has access to during that short window of time around the 4th of July. And many groups use it as fundraising opportunities and whatnot. And we encourage that use of safe and sane fireworks. Now, all those fireworks that are being sold in those booths are tested by us ad nauseum, at length. They need to not have sparks cross over a certain threshold, both in height and distance, and they have to perform as designed every time. There's no room for error in that, because recognizing that the general public's not trained like our professionals are to utilize pyrotechnic devices. So that's why we always have the safety videos. We have the reminders of folks, shouldn't be doing this near vegetation of any kind. Make sure you have water on standby, among all the other recommendations. But they are tested at length so that we can be comfortable with the public utilizing them.
So you identified one of the things I wanted to talk about is safe and sane fireworks. How can the public tell the difference between those that have been tested and those that have been identified as safe and sane versus maybe those that may be not, regulated in that way?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So a safe and sane firework is going to have the Office of the State Fire Marshal seal on it, and it will say safe and sane. Now, that seal is used for all other listings and licensing within the division and programs. So it won't say safe and sane. It'll say something else on it for what it is or what it's related to. So as far as the general public's concerned, it's going to be the only thing that you can actually purchase at one of those booths that pop up right before 4th of July. You shouldn't be buying anything in another state or online and bringing it across. That's just not going to be legal, and it's not going to be safe for you to use in such a manner as a safe and sane firework.
So for the safe and sane booths where they're sold at, is there anything that they need to follow in order to have those fireworks and sell them safely?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different safety factors that exist for those groups that are utilizing the safe and sane sales period. They'll get with one of the providers and enter into contract with them about what they're going to do and how much they're going to order and how much they expect to sell. Local jurisdictions will put upon those people their expectations as far as safety factor. Typically, nobody under 18 is allowed to be inside the booth to sell. They have to have a few fire extinguishers at the ready. There can't be any ignition devices inside. That includes anything electrical or definitely no smoking anywhere near it. I have no smoking signs and whatnot. But one of the other things, we always kind of spot check as the division. We'll go out and make sure they're selling the right product and they're not selling something that they got from another state per se. But it's July. It's hot. You're in a wooden box. Make sure you have some fans and some water and it's a little bit of a grind when you're out there in the sun. Working for your nonprofit.
Yeah, make sure to stay hydrated.
Absolutely.
Now, can you talk about maybe some of those public education efforts that, that the fire and engineering division goes through to be able to educate, local consumers and those that purchase those safe and sane fireworks?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see around that time you have the department putting on quite the social media efforts on multiple fronts when it comes to don't ruin this 4th of July. Make sure your adults are present and adults are using the devices. Any firework is still an energetic material. It's got some pop to it. And if you use it wrong, you can get hurt. If you use the safe and sane firework wrong, you can get hurt. So a lot of these videos you'll find up on our website and in the fireworks area of the Office of the State Fire Marshal, but also any of our social media campaigns that are around that time really focus on the safe handling of them before and after, because you want to make sure you're not disposing of a hot burned firework inappropriately and inadvertently creating a fire in your garbage can that runs into your eaves that takes out your house.
Well, and you bring up a good point. Having been a local fire marshal and going through that process, we would do regular patrols over the 4th of July holiday. And what we did come across one that they had utilized safe and sane fireworks and they had disposed of them and had gone, they were no longer within the area. And we ended up coming upon a trash fire. And hadn't got into the trash can yet, but we identified that. We were able to get it suppressed before it really became a much bigger issue.
Yeah, I think probably one of the safest things you can do if you're going to be in a group of people and you're going to utilize safe and sane fireworks is maybe gather up some neighbors and identify a spot where you're going to do it and have a few buckets of water, have a hose, have a plan. Get the adults together and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do if something goes wrong. Always prepare for the worst. That's what the fire service is kind of made from.
Yep.
And hope for the best. And with those steps in place, if anything does go wrong, you can take care of it pretty quick.
Yeah. Now, I think that, like you said, the different things that you can prepare to address before they go wrong. What are, some common issues that you see? One, not necessarily just maybe on the regulation of the safe and sane fireworks booths, but also maybe the handling of them after. And how can we, implement strategies to easily avoid those common issues?
Yeah. I think the number one thing would be never relight a firework that didn't work.
That's a good point.
Yeah. It happens. We'd like to say that they have a 100% success rate, but they just don't. And these devices are primarily handmade, but the consistency is part of our testing with safe and sane fireworks. So they do have to test 10 at a minimum with us and observing to make sure they're functioning as designed. So having a bucket of water so that when the show is completed or the event that's completed with you, you have a place to put these, to drown them out, to let them soak overnight before you dispose of them in any sort of trash receptacle, what kind. Just because they typically have cardboard and paper as part of their makeup, as well as the material, the pyrotechnic composition that's inside of them. But that and making sure you have a good distance away from them while you're using them to make sure that everyone can be safe, and kids in general can be around them. We want to make sure that we don't have any of these devices around vegetation and whatnot, that by the month of July should be in the brown stages and whatnot, depending on the weather.
I want to pivot a little bit. I'd like to talk a bit about messaging and outreach. You've already kind of hit on the topic of social media campaigns and the things that we do to be able to help bring and drive awareness as it relates back to safety. But what other things does the Office of State Fire Marshal do to be able to help improve or at least enhance safety regarding fireworks?
Well, I think the number one thing that we do is we really encourage people to go to those public display shows, because then you can show up with your whole family and you can have a barbecue and with your friends, and you're not worried about the show per se. Whereas if I'm in my neighborhood or I'm at my house, I got to make sure I'm taking care of the barbecue, the food, everyone's entertained. I got to make sure the dog doesn't get out. You have so many of these other things going on where this is energetic material. It's a controlled explosion. Regardless if it's safe or sane or not, you need to be focused on the safety aspect of that. And first and foremost, by taking the time to go to one of those public shows, you just don't have to worry about it. And that's kind of what I did as a kid. And I recognize that now as the position I'm in. I'm like, wow, man, I had it easy. I never had to worry about all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that made it a blast. But moving into the different public service announcements that we do, or the safety, about how you're lighting these safe and sane fireworks, using an ignition device that's safe, that you're familiar with. You're not using an old hot lighter that you're not used to and burn your thumb, possibly, burn your hand, just trying to initiate the device. And then the device falls over and now it's shooting sideways. We've seen so many different ways that this stuff can go wrong. Windy days, you shouldn't be launching or using fireworks. Like I said launching as in our licensed operators have a window that they are allowed to operate in based on the weather. They have a fallout zone based upon that restriction. And when we think about just going using safe and sane fireworks, we're just going to go use them. Well, no, you need to consider, what is going on with the weather right now. If it's a really windy day, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But when it's done right and it's safe, and we want to encourage that activity. So following the directions, following the manufacturer's recommendations, taking a minute to have a plan, making sure we have that bucket or that backup plan of that water and whatnot is the best plan.
Yeah. And, and thinking about a safe and sane firework, making sure that it's got the seal, the California seal on it, right? That's one way that you can identify that the firework that you're using, it has passed that testing. So.
And also checking with your local jurisdiction to make sure that safe and sane is allowed.
That's right. That's a good, good thing to talk about as well.
One of the key points about safe and sane fireworks is if you buy them in a county, you can't transport them outside of that county and start driving across different places that don't allow it, because now you're transporting an illegal firework.
Yep. So making sure that where you're using them, it is an allowable use to be able to use them.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people like to celebrate New Year's Eve by going to a professional show for fireworks, but some people might have safe and sane fireworks from the 4th of July holiday. So looking at the New Year's Day holiday, is that an appropriate day to use your safe and sane fireworks, or what would be an answer to that? Yes or no?
The answer is no. Safe and sane fireworks are only permitted around that time frame in the 4th of July. And I'm not hallmarking a specific time frame, because there are local jurisdictions that have made a more strict window of time for the use of safe and sane fireworks, but they must be used or surrendered. You cannot store safe and sane fireworks in a safe manner or legal manner at your house, in your garage, next to your lawnmower, or the gasoline that you use to fill your lawnmower. It's just not a good idea. And the best thing to do for if you want to see a public fireworks display on New Year's is to search one out. And they have some of the most phenomenal productions.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. As you mentioned, not storing them maybe to the next holiday. How could, someone from the public, what is the guidance that we would give someone if they have fireworks that are left over from, the 4th of July holiday? What should they do with them? And how do we maybe assist them in that process?
Right. So first and foremost, every different jurisdiction is going to have some sort of different plan in place. So I would encourage you as a member of the public to contact your local jurisdiction, whether it's the fire department or the police department. Both should be well informed as to what it is or where you should take any fireworks that were not used. And they have a legal surrender situation and whatnot. And then those local agencies will contact the arson and bomb group for disposal of those devices, alongside any of the legal devices that they've seized throughout the period as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the illegal fireworks side. And if I'm a local agency and I come across some fireworks that aren't safe and sane, and I just don't know what to do, what are some first steps that local agencies can follow to get those handled?
Well, we'd love to plan ahead, right? So if you're a local prevention officer, we want to make sure you understand what is in your purview to be able to perform a legal seizure of fireworks that do not fit the bill here in California per se. We have some assistance from the arson and bomb unit, should you need that, as well as if you have or your agency has seized any fireworks, there is a seizure report form that they can find on the arson and bomb page from the Office of State Fire Marshal, and that will put you in contact with one of our arson and bomb investigators to plan on picking up those materials. Now, there are some pretty strict rules when it comes to what it is that we will accept, because we are responsible for the collection and destruction of fireworks. We are not for improvised explosives. That's what your local bomb squad is for. So make sure you are sorting these things appropriately as a local agency, and make sure you are storing these things appropriately away from living quarters at fire stations or barbecues and that sort of thing. Just kind of I had a little flashback to some things I saw the wrong way there for a second. But yeah, and you can contact the arson and bomb unit and they'll help you through any of that.
So let's talk a little bit about safety considerations, right? As maybe a local entity or a local jurisdiction may seize fireworks, and let's talk a little bit about safety considerations and handling those, because there is a risk there, right? And so you mentioned making sure not to have them around an open flame, but where best could they store them? That way, hopefully be able to minimize that risk and that impact.
Sure. Well, local jurisdictions are obviously restricted upon their jurisdiction. So some city center places may not have extra land out in the middle of nowhere to put a Connex box to temporarily hold explosives before we can get out there and do that. So some agencies have partnership agreements with others to help them with that, or again, contact the arson and bomb unit so that we can help be part of the solution. But probably the three most important things to remember about energetic material is they're initiated by heat shock and or friction.
Mm-hmm.
So when handling these things, you do not want to drag them. You don't want them in excessive heat, and you don't want to drop them.
Right.
So we take very, very special care when we are handling them as a program through the seizure process and whatnot, to really be conscientious of those three things: heat shock and friction. So as a fire prevention officer, if you go to any of our three classes, that's some of the very things we teach to make sure that you can safely handle these things or identify when maybe you shouldn't.
Okay. That's a good perspective.
And I would like to share that we have on our website, osfm.fire.ca.gov, a lot of the webinars we've done in the past with the arson and bomb unit. So they're on there on the resources tab, and we will also link this in the video as well.
Yeah, some excellent training in those videos too, going over a lot of the devices that we do not accept.
Yeah. So it'll tell you a lot of stuff.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah. And then also for pulling licenses too. So when you're going to a big show and you're doing the inspection as the local fire marshal, where can you pull the licenses to see what are you licensed for? Are you actually doing what you're here to do?
Right. So one of the things that local will have already done, because they provided the permit for the activity, and that permit that they're providing is allowing the pyrotechnic operator to purchase, transport, store, and use that material. We would encourage you to do a back check, if you will, on that person's license. You can do that through our website. GovModus is our online records management system within the Office of State Fire Marshal. And in there is an option for verifying a license status. And fire prevention officers love this option because it isn't just for fireworks. It's for all of our different operators and licensees throughout the division. So you can look up sprinkler fitters. You can look up portable fire extinguisher technicians, the whole gamut. So using that Verify License Status tab on the initial homepage of GovModus allows you to see the current license status of any of our licensees. And it will tell you the level at which they are licensed for. So if you have any questions about that coming around 4th of July, I definitely encourage you to give the fireworks program a call, because again, there are 32 licenses within the program, so it can be a little bit much. But making sure that operator has the correct license for the activity that is being performed is very important.
So for everything that we've talked about today, what is one key takeaway that you want someone to remember when they are purchasing fireworks? What is the biggest thing that you want them to remember?
These are safe as long as they're used in a safe manner. Once you start changing that and modifying them or trying to use them in a way to function not as designed, they are dangerous. And these materials are designed to explode in a controlled manner when you follow the manufacturer's recommendations. And that is what makes a safe and sane firework legal for us to sell, to the general public without a license. Now, the bigger displays, because there's a bigger risk involved, have a higher level of training and knowledge and experience to make sure that event is safe for the public to view.
All right, Chief Bennett, as we draw this episode to a close, like I said, we could probably talk about fireworks and fireworks safety for another 45 minutes or an hour, as big a topic as this is. But where can the general public and fire code officials go to find more information?
Sure, absolutely. If you go to visit our homepage, the Office of State Fire Marshal, osfm.fire.ca.gov, you will find the Fire Engineering Investigations Division, among others. The Office of the State Fire Marshal is not a small group. And coming to the Fire Engineering Investigations Division, you will find the fireworks program. And within that, there is a plethora of information when it comes to fireworks safety, opportunities and direction if you are looking to become a licensee, and contact information if you have any other questions that maybe information we hadn't posted, and we're happy to help you find the solution.
Thank you so much for being here today, Chief. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity.
And now we are going to speak with Dr. Kathleen Romanowski. She is a burn surgeon with Shriners Children's Hospital of Northern California.
Yeah, we're going to talk about burn injuries related to fireworks, but also really burn prevention.
Yeah. We are so excited to talk to Dr. Romanowski and get really deep into burn prevention, what you can do to prevent burns and how to treat them. So please stay tuned, enjoy the episode, and learn how you can keep the sparkle in your celebration, but without the risk.
Welcome, Dr. Romanowski. Welcome. This is a very important topic, especially as we, start to get into the summer months and start to see increases in, firework usage, but also around the 4th of July holiday. So very excited to have you here to talk about, safety and prevention.
Yeah. And to get us started, Doctor, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background as a burn surgeon?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about ways we can help prevent injuries. I love my job, but I always say in an ideal world, I wouldn't have to do my job. So I have been a burn surgeon for a little over 10 years and have been here in Sacramento as a fully grown and trained burn surgeon for a little over 8. I actually did my fellowship training in burn at UC Davis and Shriners, and then left for a couple years and worked in Iowa, and then came back. So in all, have been a burn surgeon for about 10 years, here for about 8.
Okay.
Of those.
Well, that's very interesting because actually I grew up in Iowa. So we probably have maybe something in common. You're probably in the greater Des Moines area, I would imagine.
Well, I was in Iowa City.
Okay.
I know exactly the university. So
yeah. Okay. Well, we're both fellow Hawkeyes, at least a little bit. And so, but as you have evolved, as a burn surgeon, as we think about, like, as we see some of those injuries, what are some of the things from your perspective? A number of us will, when we hear an injury from a firework, right? And, I think about what I think, but I would imagine perspectives are always different. And so, as we consider that, what is like perspective versus reality when we think about, injuries associated with fireworks?
I think the interesting thing is, to be honest, the worst of the firework injuries don't actually need me. Right?
Yep.
The worst of the firework injuries usually need a hand surgeon.
Mm.
And while I do hand grafts, I'm not someone who's going to be putting hand bones back together.
Right.
So I think one of the misconceptions among many people is that the injury that they're going to get is a burn. And it is in a lot of respects, but there's also a lot of explosive injuries too.
Oh, yeah.
That lead to more disfigurement, broken bones of the hands and things like that.
So what trends do you see with injuries around fireworks season?
Well, as I said, we see a lot of hand injuries, people holding fireworks. So a lot of hand injuries, a lot of eye injuries from both things like sparklers or any other kind of firework that can kind of explode and cause an eye injury. Oddly enough, we see a lot of feet injuries. And it's because kids are often running around, or people are running around barefoot and will step on the remains of a firework that may still be hot. So hands, feet, and eyes. Obviously, we can see clothes catch on fire. You can see lots of different things, but those are kind of the three that I go, oh, yep, it's fireworks season. Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about, all the different, you highlight all the different injuries that we can see associated with fireworks, and also too maybe the other, health specialties or, healthcare areas and different injuries that we see where we need to, also maybe consider not just burn injuries.
And do you tend to see any injuries that are preventable, like more than others? Or from your perspective, what injuries are the most preventable that you see?
I would say I see a lot of injuries that are preventable, and I would say many, if not most, are preventable to a certain degree. It's hard because obviously the greatest form of prevention would be to not do these things, right? Like, but like, as I talked about with the shoes, right? Like, if you're going to be doing fireworks, people probably should be wearing footwear.
Yeah.
And probably not sandals, probably footwear that fully covers their foot. So things like that's a pretty easy prevention piece, right? Wear your shoes. Obviously not holding things in your hands if you can. Like if you're going to light them off, put them in something else before you light them, and don't light them in your hand.
Right.
And then always have water available. Like whether it's a hose, a bucket, something where you have water available in case something else catches on fire.
Yeah. So obviously, we highlight some of the prevention items, the things that you can have readily available. Let's say that somebody does become injured. What are some of those first steps that they should really consider? Because obviously they're going to call 911, but what are some of those first steps that people really should consider as they go to treat those initial injuries?
Yeah. So first of all is make sure that if something is burning, that it stops. So stop, drop, and roll. If your clothes catch on fire, it's best not to try and pull like the burning shirt off over your head. So stop, drop, and roll. Have someone use water to put out the fire. The next thing would be to have the patient or person who you're taking care of or someone with them put them either in a shower or under a hose. There's some recent data, and we actually did a pilot of it here in Sacramento of something called 20 minutes cool running water. And so you put the burn underneath cool running water for 20 minutes. And in studies that were done in Australia, it actually showed to decrease the progression of second-degree burns into third-degree burns.
Oh, wow.
And so taking a wound from something that would definitely need surgery, hopefully to something that can heal on its own. So that's one of the best things you could do if you sustain a burn injury is to just do 20 minutes of cool running water. Not cold, not ice, but just cool.
Okay.
And if you do get burned, is there something in particular that you would suggest to put on that skin? If, they run it under the water for that 20 minutes, is there anything they can put on their skin to make it feel better?
So generally we stick with, generally say if it's something small and you think you're going to try and treat it at home, we tend to use bacitracin ointment. It's over the counter. We avoid things like Neosporin. We don't recommend those anymore because it's been shown to delay wound healing a little bit. But just plain bacitracin and a nonstick bandage of some type. Okay. One of the things that a lot of people are kind of taught is that wounds need to air out, and that's generally not the case. Oh. Generally, you want to keep them covered so that the skin cells have a nice moist environment to crawl across that open area.
Oh, wow. I would be one to say that I need to let it dry out and it will heal as it dries out. I would have never thought to, keep it moistened or at least keep it covered to be able. I think keeping it covered to be able to keep bacteria and those types of things out are definitely important. But yeah, I would have probably been, and I've probably been doing it wrong all my life.
Same. So could you explain the different degrees of burns in a way that's easily understandable and maybe the threshold to call 911 or go to the emergency room?
Sure. So a first degree burn, I would hazard a guess that we've all had one because the most common first degree burn, and that involves just the outermost layer of the skin, is a sunburn. So a sunburn that doesn't blister is a first degree burn. It just affects that outermost layer that we call the epidermis. A second degree burn is when you go all the way through that epidermis and kind of into the outer portion of the next layer of skin, which is called the dermis. That's anything that blisters. So if it has a blister that forms, you have at least a second degree burn. You've gone all the way through that first layer of skin. And sometimes they break open, sometimes they don't. What to do with the blisters? It depends a little bit on where they are and what they look like, and I can talk about that in a minute. And then third degree goes deeper than that. It goes all the way through both layers of skin. Those often appear white and may even not hurt at all because they may be insensate because you may have burned kind of through that nerve layer. So those tend to be white and leathery appearing.
And I would imagine that anytime you start to see blistering, you probably should contact someone like yourself or another medical professional to have them at least, inspect the area to kind of see what the next step would be.
Yeah. Things that are very small, so, less than the size of, say, like the palm of your hand, may be able to be handled by your pediatrician or general practice doctor, depending on where it is. Say it's on your thigh or your stomach or something like that. Any general doctor may be able to help you care for that. Anything that gets beyond kind of the size of your hand or that is on an area like your face, hands, feet, you should definitely reach out to someone who maybe has some more specialized expertise.
So question then, if it's on your hands, your face, or your feet, why would you want, or why would you recommend someone to maybe seek a different practitioner to be able to help address those issues?
It has really to do with scarring, and making sure that we prevent scarring from happening. And obviously, I care about people's thighs and whether they're scarred or not, but most of them care a lot more if they can use their feet and their hands than if it was on their face. But so it's really about trying to prevent scarring and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make the both, not just aesthetic, because obviously aesthetics are important, but function. Like a lot of what I do is about trying to preserve the function of something.
And during the burn healing process, is there a point when someone should keep track on it, but should they go in if they decided to stay home, they decided to treat it themselves? What should they look for to say, okay, I need to go to the doctor?
So there's things about the wound, right? So if there's any color of fluid coming out of the wound, that
probably not a good thing, right?
Well, so if it's clear, it's probably fine. Okay. If it's opaque or color other than yellow, kind of yellow clear,
right?
You should probably see someone. So if it's green, if it's opaque, if the wound itself is not kind of pink, and if the wound is looking white and yellowish, you should come and see us. If there's redness that isn't contained by where the burn, so if the skin around the burn is getting red or angry, if you're developing symptoms of fever, chills, nausea, vomiting, those should all prompt you to seek more medical care.
Okay.
And I think about it, from my own perspective, a lot of times I'm resistant to go maybe seek medical treatment. And I would imagine that some that are listening to us may not do that as quickly as they probably should. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that we see from those like myself that may not, think I can treat it on my own and things are okay. But what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see, from people that end up then do need additional treatment?
I would say basically, I think one of the biggest is ignoring symptoms that kind of you wouldn't ignore or in
Right.
other situations,
Mhm,
right? Like
mhm.
if you had a fever for 3 or 4 days and you even if you had like a upper respiratory infection, right, and you had a fever for several days, you would probably go see someone.
Right.
You should
Yeah.
certainly come see
Okay.
someone if you have a burn and you've had a fever. So I think ignoring symptoms that you might not ignore in other cases, and I think as we've kind of already talked about, letting things dry out and scab over.
Mhm.
Sometimes that works just fine, but sometimes you can get infection underneath the scab,
Oh, okay.
which can then kind of make it the wound even deeper than it normally was. So you want to make sure that you don't want to ignore any signs of infection. Those are kind of the ones usually people get in trouble with.
Yeah, you highlight the recovery process a little bit there, and maybe some of those things that signs that they should watch out for. Can we kind of talk expand on that a little bit? Because if for some reason we start to see some of these other signs creep in, that may delay the recovery. But how can we make sure that we're doing everything that we can to maximize that recovery process?
Yeah. So soap and water. So anytime you have a wound, it should be washed with soap and water at least once a day. And then, as I said, we recommend putting something like bacitracin in a non-stick dressing over it, Band-Aid or some kind of non-stick gauze over the top of it. If it's on a part of your body that moves, you want to make sure you keep moving it. So a lot of people that come in, if they have a burn on their hand and they're stuck, their hands, like they won't move it. And it's actually the opposite of what you want to do. You want to, it may hurt, but you want to try and move it as much as possible. It helps get the swelling out. It helps maintain your range of motion. So you really want to try and move the body part as much as you can. If it's on a lower extremity, when you're not up and moving, you want to keep it elevated again, because another thing that helps with healing is to get the swelling out and decrease the amount of swelling around the wound. Yeah, those are some of the big ones.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there a certain kind of soap that you should be using when you're washing out a burn injury?
Really, any soap is fine.
Okay.
What you want to avoid, though, is the ones that have scents. So preferably unscented things. And the reason for that is because the scent is mostly an alcohol.
Oh.
And yes, you said ouch, right? And that's the problem is that it hurts.
Yeah.
And so adding anything that adds that scent to it is just going to add pain to the washing of it and make you not want to do it again. And
Interesting.
so forth. Yeah.
I didn't
So
know
any
that.
kind of soap will work. Oh, and I remember now the thing I forgot I was going to say, which is that if something hasn't healed in about 2 weeks, if you've been kind of watching something and you're like, it hasn't gotten a whole lot better, you definitely should come see us. Really, after about a week, you should come see us, because something that's going to heal on its own should be well on its way to healing by the time you're about 7 days out from an injury. If it hasn't healed and you kind of think it should have in that time, you should come see us. Certainly by the time we get to 2 weeks, we're really starting to worry about increased scarring.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Like we talked about like when maybe if we delay it, how soon we should come see you. You mentioned earlier like the different types of burns and when we should come see you, or come, go to the doctor, go to the emergency room, and seek medical treatment. But how quickly, like when should we? Obviously, I know that like if something explodes in my hand and I have damage to my hand, I'm probably going to go seek medical care immediately. But if we're trying to talk to people that are using some type of firework, when should we maybe recommend they seek immediate treatment?
I would say anything that involves hand, feet, and face,
Right.
should, unless it's very small, should probably, if you have something the size of a dime on your hand,
Mhm.
you maybe don't need to run to the emergency room. But anything that's kind of like the size of your hand probably should, or the size of your palm,
Okay.
you probably should go see someone sooner rather than later. And same with feet and faces. And then we start really talking about how deep is it. So people, if you have any kind of size of burn that's white and leathery, you should probably come see someone right away. And then the other thing we think about is size,
Okay.
right? So as burn surgeons, we think about things as percentages of your whole body. And you go like, well, how am I supposed to figure this out? What is a percentage of my own body? Well, luckily, we all come with our own measuring device attached to us.
Oh.
And that's our hand. So your hand, including your fingers, is approximately 1% of your body.
I did
That's
not know
cool.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, now Kara and I are looking at our hands to try to figure out, okay, like how do I measure? How do I size up? So,
So, certainly if it's above, some people would say like above 2 hands, but certainly if we're getting up into the 4 to 5 hands of your
yeah.
body,
that's a lot.
you should probably seek care immediately. Certainly if it's greater than that, you should seek care immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my general rule of thumb is if it's above 2 hands.
Okay.
That's a pretty good rule of thumb. I mean, literally, in a sense, right? But yeah, I would think about that. Yeah, like as I said, I would imagine that there are some that are very similar to myself that typically think I can handle it myself. I can, I'm going to delay but when should we really go? And, like you said, hands, feet, and face are probably, those instances, especially if it's over, a certain percentage of the body, when we should seek medical treatment immediately.
And are there any resources or organizations that you'd like to highlight that support burn prevention or any messaging?
Yeah, so obviously there are some resources through Shriners, who I work for. They have a lot of great resources for burns and for some information about burn prevention. And then the other one I'd bring up is the American Burn Association. We have a lot of public-facing free information about prevention and prevention processes through the American Burn Association as well. So those are probably the two that I would highlight.
Okay.
Where can they find that information, should they want to learn more about our conversation today on burn injury prevention and fire safety? Yeah,
so the ABA's website is ameriburn.org.
Okay.
So they have a lot of prevention things on there. Shriners is also online and has burn prevention information on their website as well.
So what is one final message you would like to leave our listeners with today?
I guess the message I'd like to leave is, I hope people have a wonderful 4th of July. I hope they enjoy this beautiful area that we get to live in and enjoy the professionally done fireworks if you can. And obviously the only way to stay 100% safe is to not set them off or use them in your home or near your home. But if you're going to try to do so as safely as possible, follow some of the tips that we've talked about and, never be afraid to reach out. We're happy to see anyone, right? So we've talked a lot about people not wanting to seek care, but
Right.
I want people to know that also that we're happy to see anyone. If you have any kind of burn injury and even if it's small, even if I tell you, nope, it's going to be fine, you'll be healed in a couple of weeks, I'm happy to do that.
Right.
So, don't hesitate to come see us if something does go awry. We're happy to take care of you.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Dr. Romanowski, I really do appreciate it. I think it's a very timely conversation, and I think we were able to cover a lot of ground today. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Have a safe 4th of July.
Oh, technically we are professionals. I can put this on my resume as a skill. I don't know if it's going to help me get any future jobs, but at least it's there.
I saw a Pokemon podcaster job. Sorry, doctor.